Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, copy. Deja vu.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows that were later rebooted. This is
Why are you laughing?
because I think that this episode is hilarious. This is season 1, which we're calling In the Zone, discussing the Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 16, titled The Hitch-Hiker. And The Hitch-Hiker came out on the 22nd of January, 1960. It was directed by Alvin Ganzer. It was written based on a radio play written by Lucille Fletcher, but then the teleplay was written by Rod Serling. And it starred Inger Stevens, Adam Williams, to a lesser extent Lou Gallo, and Leonard Strong.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
Suddenly up ahead,
just
a door.
You're moving into a land, another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so here's the opening Serling voiceover from The Hitch-Hiker. Her name is Nan Adams. She's 27 years old. Her occupation, buyer at a New York department store. At present, on vacation, driving cross-country to Los Angeles, California from Manhattan. Minor incident on Highway 11 in Pennsylvania, perhaps to be filed away under accidents you walk away from. But from this moment on, Nan Adams's companion on her trip to California will be terror. Her route, fear. Her destination, quite unknown.
And the IMDb description of the actual episode is: a young woman driving across country becomes frantic when she keeps passing the same man on the side of the road. No matter how fast she drives, the man is always up ahead, hitching her for a ride.
And I just want to say I love that last bit of the opening voiceover. The companion will be terror, her route, fear, her destination, unknown. That is my motto for life now. My companion will be terror, my route, fear, and my destination, unknown.
And your companion on this podcast will be disappointment.
No, I think terror is fine. I'm fine with that.
I did want to point out that Inger Stevens, who plays Nan Adams, who's the main and kind of only character in this, although there's some other side characters, I thought did a great job, and she is one of those tragic Hollywood stories. She died of an overdose, I guess, at 35, and that made me sad.
She was how old when she did this episode?
She was 25, so she died. This was, or about 25, because this came out in 1960, and she died in 1970. So somewhere in the 25-ish area. No,
she was really good, and it is another one of those Twilight Zone episodes with really a single protagonist who's just about the only character. There's a couple other characters who are in there for short bits, but she has to carry the whole thing. She's in just about every frame of it. And there's a lot of parts where we're really just on her and there's not much else going on. We're just watching her face, so she had to be very expressive.
Yes, and because this is another episode that we see voiceovers that are not from Serling. There's a lot of her driving and thinking, and so she's doing the voiceovers, and so she's really just kind of sitting there reacting to her own voiceovers, which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah, and I'm not an actor, which anyone who has seen me act would vouch for. There's a part, not just when she's driving, which is when a lot of these happen, because she's driving across country, and I want to talk about some of the driving shots later, but there's a part right after she almost gets hit by a train. It's about 10 minutes in, just before the commercial break, where she's not even driving. She's just sitting in her car. The car is stopped, and it's like a minute-long shot of voiceover of her explaining what's going on, but there's nothing happening on screen, no action, no dialogue or anything, and she just has to run it's a close-up on her face, and she just has to run her face through like 15 different emotions over the course of a minute. I mean, that's just got to be really rough to do.
Yeah. Before we get away from the stats too, Mark, I also want to point out that this, based on a radio play by Lucille Fletcher, who also wrote Sorry, Wrong Number, and I mistakenly thought Sorry, Wrong Number was that When a Stranger Calls, which is not what it is, which is with the babysitter sitting and there's calls from in the house, but it's not that. Right. Sorry, Wrong Number was I think Orson Welles called it the greatest radio play he's ever heard. It was a woman.
What does Orson Welles know about radio plays?
Isn't you mean the voice from Pinky and the Brain? A woman in Sorry Wrong Number, there's some telephone lines that are crossed, so she overhears a murder plot and hears that really not a whole lot of detail except for when it's going to happen. So she runs around the whole time apparently trying to convince people that this is going to happen, and the police are like, well, we can't really do anything, like we just have a time. So she's kind of trying to solve this. It's almost like Minority Report with the precogs. She's trying to solve a murder before the murder actually happens, and it's supposed to be really good. I think we should try and find that at some point.
And a little bit like the Cassandra complex too, like being doomed to know the future, but you can't do anything to stop it.
Yes, and I wrote something similar to that because this episode had a similar feel. It was a very kind of gaslighty episode, and there was kind of a feel of no one believes her, and we can't do anything kind of story.
Yeah. Before you move off that
Sure.
wrong number thing, two things. One, when a stranger calls where it's coming from inside the house, this just reminded me of, I'll give a shout out to some former students from long ago who did a little short thing where there was two people driving in a car, and they keep getting this call on their cell phone, like making threatening sounds and stuff. And at the end, it was like a little comedic sketch. The end is like, the call's coming from inside the car. And for the first time, the camera has been shooting from behind him, and it turns around to like look through the windshield, and you see in the back seat somebody's crouching down making a phone call.
I like that.
The other thing that made me want to reference, because we often try to recommend good movies
things,
or
yeah.
TV shows, like things people should check out if they haven't, is the Francis Ford Coppola film starring Gene Hackman, The Conversation, which if you haven't seen it is definitely worth checking out, and I won't spoil how it ends. But the Gene Hackman character is a detective / audio recordist or surveillance expert. And one of the just really cool things about that, I kind of love it as an audio person, it is a crucial element of the plot ends up centering on this one recording he's made of this couple, and kind of how you interpret this one line that gets said, that the line is, he'd kill us if he had the chance. And is it like he'd kill us if he had the chance, like that he would turn the tables, or he'd kill us if he had the chance, like we need to escape, he's going to try to kill us, sort of thing. And that's a fascinating movie in general, but this idea of like overhearing something and how that can be interpreted or misinterpreted, and there's scenes in this where he's just like listening, Gene Hackman's listening to it over and over and trying to interpret like which meaning it has.
Conversation is great. Conversation is one of the most, if you describe it to anyone, sounds like the most boring goddamn movie. Gene Hackman sitting in a room listening to audio. It is such a good movie. And you're right, inflection matters. And that's why you guys, if you're in a fight with someone, if you have a loved one that you have not been talking to, do not try to resolve it over text. Call them, go over to their house, because and frankly, especially with Nan in this one, Inger Stevens, the actress, inflection matters, facial expressions matter, all of these things matter. So just go and actually communicate away from a telephone. And call your mother every once in a while, everyone.
When you were saying conversation is great, I literally, even though I just said it, forgot we were talking about the movie The Conversation, thought you were just praising the idea of conversation.
I love it. It's been around for a long time.
Following up on your PSA about texting, just have to give a shout out to Key and Peele, with Jordan Peele also being in charge of the new Twilight Zone reboot.
Yes.
For their sketch about how text messages can be misinterpreted, where they're just texting each other back and forth, and one of them is getting increasingly angry and irate at how he's interpreting the text messages, and the other person just thinks they're having a friendly conversation.
Right. Yeah. We should try and get Jordan Peele on this. We should try and get him to listen to this, because I wonder if he's watched all these episodes. He's probably never even seen the Twilight Zone.
He's probably looking for pointers and would appreciate us pointing out these things on this 60-year-old show. Yeah,
we've punched up a lot of these episodes that he could probably use the help. I don't think Jordan Peele is successful enough in Hollywood yet. He needs our help.
But with our help, he could really make something of himself.
This is as good a time as any. Mark, have you watched any? I have not watched any of those episodes of the new one, and I really do want to.
I have not. I probably will check it out at some point. I've I really liked I like Key and Peele. It was very smart and very funny. And Get Out, like, I don't know if I've seen a more assured directorial debut of a filmmaker.
So
like, it's fantastic.
It was so creepy.
Yeah, and it's like it's a super good story, and it's really well crafted and made. And we actually did we do an event once a semester that my Commons puts on, where we like rent out a movie theater and show a movie and invite everyone at SMU to come see it for free. And we did Get Out one semester and just had like such a great conversation afterwards. Everyone loved the movie, and there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So my point being, I have a ton of respect for Key and Peele, and particularly Jordan Peele as a filmmaker. And I would like to check out some of the new Twilight Zones that he's been involved with at some point. I will say I've been kind of consciously avoiding it as we're doing this podcast because some of their episodes are remakes of some of the episodes we're going to see.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And even just the tone of it, I wanna go into the reboot of it with all of this context of whenever we stop,
like 6 years from now,
right? Well, if we make it all the way through, so be it. But with the context of the original. But yeah, to go from. By the way, Key and Peele, I know you also like. One of the best sketch comedy shows that has ever been created. It's a tragedy that they didn't do more, but I also think that's a really good move to do that surgical strike, get in, get out, and leave at the height of your game. Because you look at like Family Guy, Arrested Development, these Futurama, even, although I liked when Futurama came back, some of these shows that you have super fond memories of that come back and for another run sometimes don't hold up very well. Anyhow.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's hard to have a show that is really good and really strong and then get out while it's still
at the height.
That. Yeah, because there's so much money to be made by keeping it running.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, let's talk about what we're supposed to be talking about.
What are we supposed to be talking about?
Twilight Zone, The Hitch-Hiker. Episode, what are we on, 16?
Okay, hold on a minute. I need to go watch that episode. I'll be back.
Pause for 22 minutes. So right off the bat, this was another episode that I think was telegraphed, that the ending or the twist was telegraphed, I thought, very, very early on, because we meet the protagonist, Nan, and she is at a mechanic, basically, and the mechanic's like, oh, you how fast were you going and all this stuff. And she tells him, and he's like, and you spun out, skid mark, and blah, blah, blah. He's like, by all rights, you shouldn't have called for a mechanic. Somebody should have been calling for a hearse. And then just a few beats later, or scenes later, I guess, she says at one point, she's like, oh, cheaper. When she gets her tire, she's like, oh, it's cheaper than a funeral, isn't it? And I thought right off the bat, it was super obvious that she was dead and that she had died in this accident. And that was the twist, the crux of the thing. I was still kind of interested in this episode, but I thought they kind of gave up the ghost a little bit early on this one.
Right there with you. I wrote down the same two lines, although I might have miswrote it. I thought that the mechanic was the one who said cheaper than a funeral, isn't it? But in any case, both of those lines, like, yeah, it's super telegraphed, and I like have my first note on this was just noting that the episode started with another tilt down from the Twilight Zone starfield to the road. Yeah. My second one was just typing Nan Adams' name correctly, so I had it in my notes. And the third one was, well, clearly she really died.
Yeah.
It comes through right away. But like you said, I was still interested in kind of seeing how it plays out and how the Hitchhiker is going to play into this. You know, there's something we've seen in a couple of these episodes when they do telegraph things where sometimes they're trying so hard to have a surprise or a twist that they sort of sabotage themselves a little bit. And even if we had known right from the get-go for sure, and the episode just sort of was clear about that she had died and didn't know she had died, that could be an interesting thing as well, watching her process that. And instead it tries so hard to not to make that like the surprise at the end, even though it had super telegraphed that's where it was happening at the beginning, that it made itself a little less interesting than it could have been.
Yeah. I mean, the entire movie's The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis does not realize he's dead. But again, that is twist. That's revealed obviously at the end. But you certainly could make something interesting of that idea without her knowing it.
Yeah, and of course in The Sixth Sense, the thing is at the end of it when you see the twist, which is a surprise, that was not like telegraphed,
Right.
but then you like want to go rewatch it and like, wait, how did I miss all these clues? This one I didn't finish and like, wait, I gotta go rewatch and see how I missed all these clues. I was like, no, it was super obvious she was dead.
Right, and as you know, I like to play devil's advocate. At the time that this was released, maybe this was not as obvious, and they're like, "Oh, well, that can't be the answer," because we've, in this context, have seen this a lot. We have seen things with ghosts. We saw Casper the Friendly Ghost. We've seen these different things that actually are kind of portraying that. So I guess I'll just give a little bit of benefit of the doubt and say, or maybe people in 1960 were super dumb and they just did not pick up on that. But I thought it was a little bit eye rolling that it was told to us in the first 3-4 minutes of the episode what was actually happening.
Let the record show that you referenced Casper the Friendly Ghost.
I'll put it in the show notes.
I want to say when he said cheaper than a funeral, he drove out to where her car was on the highway and got her a new tire and added the tax. It came to $29.70.
Yes.
And I can say having to occasionally have service calls for my car and replace tires and pay tax, not one of those things is ever below $29.70, much less altogether.
The phone call to get the guy to come out there might be under $29.70.
Maybe it depends. It depends if you're roaming or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also so. I gotta gripe a little bit with this mechanic. So he does something to her car. I'm not really sure exactly what happened, and then he tells her to follow her back to the shop, and then like, so her car clearly is okay and can drive, and then takes off. And when she drives away after, so she like looks at the hitchhiker and then like drives away, and they have this wide shot of her driving away, and the mechanic's car truck isn't even visible anymore. He's like long gone. And I'm like, okay, if he thought something still was wrong with her car that he needs to like take a look at in the shop, then he should have stayed and kept her in sight. If not, if it was fixed and they just need to go back to the shop to like settle up, he's pretty trusting, assuming that she'll follow him and pay him, given that he's already done all the work and has no idea who she is.
It was more innocent time.
I guess so. I would have taken off, man.
Here's a segue to that. Speaking of more innocent time, at one point, Nan says, she's talking about the hitchhiker that she keeps seeing everywhere and he keeps jumping ahead of her in the road. And we'll get to this, I'm sure, but she's talking to a guy and she's like, I think he's trying to rob me. I was like, oh, that's so innocent. That's what you think that this guy is trying to do to you. It was a nicer time, I thought.
Yeah, well, and the part where she picks up the sailor and they're driving together.
Yes.
There's a portion where I thought he was gonna get a little handsy or something.
100%.
The episode like didn't even go. It was almost like that wasn't even a thought that that's what could happen.
Yes. I thought he was going to be the villain, like that typical because the hitchhiker, some version of this, people are apparently terrified of hitchhikers. Some version of this has been done a million different ways in Hollywood. There's the one, and then there's the idea of the car driving behind someone late at night, and they keep flashing in their lights and beeping, and the car keeps speeding up and like trying to get away from them. They finally lose the car, stop the car, and then the person has been in their backseat, and the car behind them was trying to warn them, and the person kills them. There's a million different people are terrified of driving alone, but
as we saw in Perchance to Dream,
right? I thought this was going to be the sailor was the bad guy, and the hitchhiker was trying to warn her, I guess, but like that wouldn't really make sense. And this is another episode where this was more of a horror story than a sci-fi Twilight Zone-y feeling episode, which we've had a few of those, not horror stories, but like that they didn't have a lot of Twilight Zone, what we consider the Twilight Zone elements to it. I think this was one of those, other than, the spoiler alert, when we find out she's dead, it seems like the hitchhiker is kind of death leading her in, because he finally is like going my way, and she kind of accepts him at the end, which I thought was a neat moment. Just lets him into the car, and he's a passenger on her car at the end of it, and she kind of just accepts that she's dying. And there's been a lot of that in Serling Serling's writings and Serling's different shows of acceptance of death. We saw it with One for the Angels. We've seen death appear quite a bit on Twilight Zone, and this was another take on death.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. I had something I was going to say, and then I lost track when you went in a different direction.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, I think you're right. It was not very. It wasn't, as we've often said. Obviously, it's a Twilight Zone episode, so we can't say it's not very Twilight Zone-y, but right. It doesn't fit our sort of common conception of the Twilight Zone very much.
Right.
You know, I was thinking some more about the voiceover, and I think this is the. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the only episode I remember, at least. Well, I guess you can't correct me on that. This is the only episode I remember. Correct me if there are
no,
other
it's not.
ones
You remember other episodes
that has what I would consider like a true voiceover from one of the characters. So like in Perchance to Dream, we get parts where he's kind of narrating it, but it's also supposed to be within the story that he's narrating it to the psychiatrist, and that's what we're hearing.
Oh, good point.
And in The Lonely, we have some VO, but he's narrating what he's writing in his journal. So this is, I think, the first one we've had that's a true just like VO. We're hearing what's inside somebody's head with no ulterior sort of rationale for it. And it felt out of place to me, not because it didn't fit within the context of the episode, but it caught me so off guard when her voiceover came in, because we're just not used to having that in Twilight Zone. It wasn't what I expected out of that. And
there was so much voiceover from her. There was a ton of it. There were long stretches of it, and there was a lot of it.
Because basically nothing happens in the episode.
Right.
Like she stops the mechanic, gets her car going again, and she drives until the end of the episode with, you know, a couple places where she stops and talks to someone briefly and then keeps driving. Like, it really, there's not much that happens. So I think they were looking for something to kind of fill in that space.
One of the people, by the way, she stops and talks to is in this diner, and she's like, "Oh, do you get a lot of hitchhikers around here?" And this guy had so many opinions on hitchhikers. I felt like this guy had just sat around and thought about, why don't we get more hitchhikers around here? He goes on like a 5-minute tirade about like hitchhikers and why there aren't hitchhikers around here. It was very, very strange.
No, my only note about that whole scene is the waiter at the diner goes into quite the spiel about hitchhikers.
I'm glad we had the same thought about that.
Then do you remember at the end of that scene, she kind of like gets up and she's like backing away from the restaurant guy, like she's scared of him or something, right, just because he's gone on this long spiel about hitchhikers.
I will say too, since we sort of talked about her reactions, Ingrid's reactions to this stuff, another great job that she did. So I thought, and When the Sky Was Open was some of our most realistic reactions, and I thought she, from Clegg or whoever, I think she did probably my favorite job in reacting to this crazy situation realistically.
Yeah, and there is kind of, it's interesting, the voiceover stays like more calm and composed, but her sort of facial expressions, like you can tell she's getting panicked and freaking out about this. And again, I think she walked the line pretty well here, that if this was too subtle, this would be boring because we'd be staring at her face doing nothing.
Yeah.
But if it was over the top, it would seem like crazy. And I think she found a good
mix, or a good
good kind of place to pitch the performance. I did want to know, just when we were talking, I was saying like not a lot happened. I made a note at the first commercial break, which is 10 minutes in, so about 40% of the episode. We got 60% of it left. And I'm like, there's got to be more coming than just more of her driving and seeing him and getting more scared, because that's all that's been going on, and it's feeling really stretched. And then it kept doing a lot more of that. We did have the sailor part added in to at least have some variation. But I was wondering if the VO was added in post, like if that was part of the original script, or if that was something they added to like be able to stretch the episode more and make it feel like something more was happening than we could see on screen. My guess is no. I think it was probably from the script, but it wouldn't surprise me if it turned out that had been a decision they made in post.
Now, my only reason I would think that it was probably in the script, because if this was based on a radio play, is that it probably had just a lot of, I mean, they obviously couldn't even rely on her acting. So there probably would have been, right?
That's a really good point. And maybe it's kind of the reverse. So I was thinking of it like a filmmaker, but you're right. It came from a radio play. So maybe it was the reverse. Like they had all the voiceover and stuff, and what they were trying to do was figure out what can we show visually that's interesting during this time, and that's why it feels a little stretched.
And it turns out not much. Should we take a break, Mark?
On that note.
Keep talking about this after the break?
Sure.
We'll be right back.
Okay, welcome back. So, Mike, as I always do, and you've been doing more and more as well, I wanted to look a little bit at the actual production of this episode and kind of the filmmaking, which I thought, first off, it was a really nice production value to get out of the studio, have all these exteriors, and most of what we've seen, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, I Shot an Arrow, where they were out in this vast wasteland of outside Reno, Nevada, and took advantage of that to get some wide exteriors and really kind of show the space. And I thought we got some more of that nicely here too, because mostly what we've seen, even that was like an alien landscape, and everything's been kind of like alien or urban. And this is like driving through a lot of rural areas, and it looks like, I mean, some of these areas might be pretty close together, but in terms of their look, they got some different kinds of scenery, different kinds of feel, and had some good driving shots, through the windshield. There's a couple cool shots like looking back behind her and seeing the hitchhiker after she drove past him. And I just appreciated that it was an interesting mix of feeling really confined, in the sense of she feels like she's like trapped. She's on this road and can't get away from the hitchhiker, and she's trapped in the car and on this route, but at the same time, this confinement within really wide open spaces. She's driving across the whole country.
I'm going to ask you this, because there was a shot that I thought that I got a real Hitchcock vibe from, that I don't know if I don't know why. I don't know. It's been a while since I've watched him. I guess I watched Rope relatively recently, but got a Hitchcock vibe from, there was a shot when she is waiting for her car stops on some train tracks, and there's this very dramatic moment where the train's coming toward her, which reminded me of Train coming toward a screen back in the first film. And then she
Train coming into the station.
Right. Yeah. She just gets out of the way, and she's sitting watching the train go by. And there's a shot from her back seat over her shoulder. We're just watching the train go by. I don't know why, but I got a very Hitchcockian vibe from that. Is there a reason, do you think? Maybe? I don't know.
I'm not enough of a Hitchcock expert to tell you for sure yes or no. There wasn't a particular Hitchcock shot that I remember that jumped out as, but I think the feel of that whole segment was sort of like the building suspense in the editing, cutting back and forth between the things, and a pretty simple suspense like, will her car will start? Will she be able to move? I think that feels Hitchcockian in tone.
Yeah.
The specific shot itself, I'm not sure.
Well, and the whole thing was, I mean, the platinum blonde damsel in distress had a Hitchcock vibe to it.
Interestingly, several of the shots, since you mentioned that with her driving, reminded me of Psycho and the early part of the movie with Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
And I think there's some shot. I mean, there's only so many ways you traditionally shoot somebody in a car, so some of the shots are gonna look similar. But it reminded me of that, and I was thinking these would have been probably in production about the same time, because Psycho came out in 1960. I don't remember when, but these would be of that same time period.
Speaking of those track shots, when I was a kid, or when you were a kid, do you remember feeling like there was a lot of danger of being stuck in a car on train tracks? Because I have like vivid memories of thinking that a car was going to die on the train tracks.
And we talked about another one of those the other day. Was it quicksand or something like that?
Yes, quicksand.
Like that you think of as a kid like is going to be this huge danger, and then you never encounter.
Yes, it was definitely quicksand.
Well, because generally when unless you intentionally stop yourself on the train tracks, you're like going forward over them. So even if your car dies, like your momentum would just carry you over the train tracks, unless you like intentionally hit the brakes to stop yourself there.
I have literally the word momentum in my next point on this, because that's exactly what I was thinking. And she clearly does hit the brakes, which was strange. And then she sees the hitchhiker on the other side of the tracks. And I'm like, oh, it would have been kind of cool if he like walked in front of her car and she had to stop to avoid hitting him. But she didn't. She just stopped, and then her car died on the tracks, and she almost got hit by a train.
Well,
It was
except
weird.
I was a little confused there because she like sees him on the other side of the tracks, and then she like kind of tries to go over the tracks, and then her car stops there. I agree, it would have made more sense if he like stepped out. But I'm like, she sees the train coming because the barrier's going down, the lights flashing, or whatever. Wouldn't she want him on the other side of the tracks, like the
Right.
train between them? Like, I would have stayed on that side and let the train go by. And instead, she's like, no, I got to try to, like, get past him before the train comes or something. I don't know.
Well,
It
and
seems
especially
strange.
since ultimately she ends up reversing off the tracks, so she does have the train in between them. Like, she doesn't go forward,
Right.
which would have made more sense. It was a little strange.
Did you notice there was when the we rarely talk about the sound other than a couple of times we talked about the music, and that's probably a good thing. Like, the Twilight Zone does not have super intensive sound design, so generally if it's going unnoticed, that probably means it's fine. There was a weird sound effect when the train just misses her. It was like a kazoo, like the train is about to go by and it's like,
Oh, the Doppler. Well, I noticed
what
that the
the heck
Doppler
was
effect when it actually did go by was pretty goddamn aggressive. So, but
we like our Doppler effects.
I didn't see it as it didn't stand out that much to me. Before we get off the shots of it, I thought, I don't know when the first thing of this was, but the old horror trope of you backed into something and turn around and it's like a cat or something, or it's not. So this was one of the first ones or oldest ones that I've ever seen. She like finally she gets out of her car runs out of gas, which, by the way, she picks the creepiest road. She like tries to lose the hitchhiker by taking the creepiest road that she could find in the dead of the night, and then runs out of gas. So
Which, in fairness, I had been wondering, like, well, why doesn't she just get off this main route, since she seems like that's where the hitchhiker's following her? Just go on a different road. So she finally does, but she goes in the middle of the night. And instead of taking, like, they talk about she's on the turnpike. So instead of, like, getting off the turnpike onto, like, a U.S. highway or something, she, like, gets off the turnpike onto, like, a random dirt road. Yeah.
yeah, there's
I'll
like
make my own route.
Speaking of sound, I was waiting for a banjo to start playing in the background. So, and then, so when she goes to get gas, there's an interesting scene when the gas station owner asks what the stalker, and I inadvertently used stalker, but hitchhiker, but let's say stalker because I do feel like that's one of the modern applicability things. And she can't really say anything. He's like, what's he doing? She's like, he's standing there. And that's one of the problems, though, I think, I think the stalker laws are getting better. But you can be a pretty awful, horrible, creepy, effective stalker without actually breaking the law, which is a scary kind of thing. Because, like, I never watched SpongeBob SquarePants, but for whatever reason, he's just standing there menacingly somehow got to me through memes or something. So I had to actually look that up. But that reminds me of the SpongeBob line. It doesn't remind me because I've never seen it, but it made me think of that meme where it's like he's just standing there menacingly. It's like, well, he didn't really do anything. What do you want me to do?
I'm super confused about the SpongeBob reference.
There's some line in SpongeBob where it's like he's just standing there menacingly. I don't know. It reminds me of this. So if someone else wants to tell me what I'm thinking about, please tell me. We do a lot of that.
Okay, wait, I'm finding it.
So I'll keep going while you're doing that then. While actually you're looking that up, I do want to give a shout out to the actual guy who played the hitchhiker, who was Lou Ford, I think was his name. No, I'm sorry. Leonard Strong was the hitchhiker. And he was just abundantly creepy in his appearance. And
He's got this like giant grin on.
Yeah, and he's only has a couple lines through the whole thing, so he's mostly like that like Michael Myers Halloween, like silent, scary guy. And I will say he has the creepiest freaking way of giving a thumbs up, though, like a hitchhiking thumbs up. He like doesn't make a fist, so like his thumb is, and he doesn't lift his thumb much. He was super creepy and unsettling. I will give him credit for that.
And creepier than if he would have been standing there menacingly, it would have been like less creepy, because instead he's like got this giant grin, like he's
Yeah.
trying to look like a harmless old man or something.
And no one else can see him is another one of those moments. I did think I'll go back to the shooting again. One more thing. The first gas station that they pull, or when they do fix her tire and she pulls away from the gas station, there's kind of this jump scare moment where the hitchhiker's face just comes from like the right side of the screen. And he's kind of like nodding into the camera almost. I thought that was a little bit unnecessary, but relatively creepy.
I know. I'm glad you pointed that out because I noticed the same thing. They do it again once later in the episode, and I use the same term, jump scare. I'm like, they're trying to jump scare the audience weirdly because like there'll be a wide shot where we're watching something in the background, and he just like comes up super close to the camera, and he totally breaks the fourth wall and like looks right at the camera, and then looks over. I'm like, I don't get what this is about. It's just weird.
Yeah, that was super weird.
I want to jump back to the train for a second. And this isn't modern applicability. This was just like, I don't know, common sense. The train is coming from, it's coming super slow.
Inside the
apparently, 'cause
house.
they keep cutting back to it, like coming towards her while she's on the tracks, and then like cut back, and it's like hasn't really moved. It reminded me a little bit of the scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where there's the two guards at the door,
charging,
and they like see him like running up with the sword. Cuts back to the guards, cuts back to him. It's the same clip. He's still at the same distance.
Right.
Does that several times. But I'm also like, this train engineer is a super asshole because he can see her coming from like forever away and like honks, but doesn't slow down or anything when he sees there's a car clearly stopped on the tracks. He's just like, yeah, there's a car down there. We're going to hit it.
Yeah, he's like,
and
everyone
then,
brace yourself.
even as it like screams by, there was like no attempt to slow down or anything. I'm like, I think a train engineer, if he saw a car clearly stopped on the tracks, would at least have tried to slow the train.
They try and stop for cows, don't they? Like, they try and stop for almost everything. Like, I hope they would try and stop.
That's why the trains take forever to get anywhere.
Yeah, except for in 1930s Berlin. Or I guess that was Italy.
Wow, that got super dark.
The trains run on time, Mussolini. Anyhow.
There was a time when I was living in Chicago and my wife was living in St. Louis, and she was like, and so we had driven back and forth sometimes to visit each other or flown, because back in those days you get a Southwest had some crazy deal where it was like $30 or $34 each way. But one time she's like, I'm going to take the train. And so I went down. I was living up in north of the city, but I took the local train, like the L, downtown, and went to Union Station where her train was supposed to be coming in. And I was there for like 6 hours because I got there and they're like, this train is delayed. It'll be half an hour late. I'm like, I gotta wait half an hour. And they would never just tell you, like, clearly the train was like still hours away when I got there, but they would never tell you that.
Right.
It's like every 15 minutes they'd update the thing like, it's 15 minutes more delayed, and for 6 hours.
I've been on that train before. It was kind of a fun trip for us, but yeah, it's
yeah, I'm sure it was more annoying for her because she was like stuck on the train. But I was just like, when I got down here, if you would have just said, hey, the train's gonna be 6 hours late, I would have like gone and got dinner or something.
Right.
But I like had to stay like there by the boards, like, oh, it's gonna be here in 15 minutes for 6 hours.
And if it would have been like 12 hours, you'd been like, all right, I'm gonna go and get a divorce.
I'd be like, I'm gonna get on a train going the other way, and we'll just meet in the middle somewhere.
If a train leaves Chicago traveling, no. Speaking of that, there was kind of a funny moment where she's like trying to rationalize, which again, I thought was a nice moment that Nan was trying to actually figure out how this guy, she's like, well, wait a minute. Isn't it possible that this guy could have gotten in front of me without like supernatural? She's like, if he got picked up like right after I saw him and like drove faster than me, could he have gotten in front of me? And the guy's like, the diner guy is like, yeah, I guess. Why are you asking?
And then she asked the sailor the same question. And she's like, if I'm going 45 and another car's going 70. And I was like, wait, you're like panicking. If you can go 70, why don't you go 70?
Right.
Which we already know she's a fast driver from the opening scene where the guy's like, you hit this curve going 65 or whatever.
You're lucky you're alive.
Yeah.
Too
bad you're not.
True. Speaking of that sailor, where the hell did he come from in the middle of the night at this gas station off this creepy road? Also, you guys,
best I can figure, he was walking to San Diego from like the middle of the country.
Yeah, to catch his boat.
Down this dirt road in the middle of nowhere.
And he found this super attractive blonde woman in the middle of, he's like, hey, jackpot.
Well, that I actually thought that part was kind of clever when then he's like, when I go back, this is before he realizes she's a total nut job. He's like, when I go back to the ship and tell the guys like who picked me up, like that nobody's gonna believe me. She's like, oh, I'll sign you an affidavit.
Yeah,
so,
that was
there's
neat.
this cute little scene there, and then she like clearly is insane because she sees the hitchhiker, and instead of like the first time, I could see if he had been in the car for a while, and like he has never seen the hitchhiker, she like tries to take a bigger move. But instead, the first time she sees him, she like swerves the car,
Tries to kill him.
tries to hit the hitchhiker, and then the sailor like grabs the wheel, like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Didn't you see that guy?" And he's like, "No." And he's also like, "If there was a guy, why were you trying to hit him?"
Right. Yeah. Before we get to that part of the sailor's existence in this episode, just a general rule of thumb, guys, if you're walking up behind someone, especially in the dead of night, and they seem to be in a panic, don't just walk up and touch their shoulder. Like, announce yourself. You know what? Don't touch each other without permission at all, especially now with the coronavirus. But also, like, announce yourself. Like, just be like, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you okay?" That will still startle her, but not as much as walking up behind her and grabbing her shoulder, like the sailor chose to do. And also,
Although
when
that was a
first
nice
meet,
little moment of tension though, because he like reaches out, puts it. I mean, it is like
you think it's
super
going to be the
cheesy.
hitchhiker.
Right, but they like, he puts his hand on her shoulder. She like recoils, turns and looks at him, and the camera keeps him off screen for quite a long moment.
Yeah.
And her facial reaction, like, I thought was really good because
Yes.
I would have bought it either as it is the hitchhiker or she's startled that it's somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also a very weird line when they first meet, and maybe you can tell me what you think this meant. At one point, he calls her a lady, and she's like, "That's what I am. I'm a lady." And I didn't know if that was another hint that she's dead, or it was such a weird line and out of place, I thought. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I also thought it was a weird line. My interpretation of it was it is right after she's kind of been told off by the gas station attendant who she woke up out of bed. And I thought she was, because he was just kind of like a jerk, like, "Well, come back in the morning and get gas and blah, blah, blah." And like, I was, like, you're already out of bed. Just let her buy some gas for Pete's sake. I thought she was like, so sort of like distraught from that. She's like, "Yes, no, I'm a late, like, I don't deserve to be treated like that. I don't know." That was how I interpreted it. But I have no idea. It was a weird line.
That makes more sense. So, and then when they're in the car, I had a couple thoughts about this car. One, they did not get enough gas to make it very far with 1960 gas mileage. They get like a big gulp's worth of gas from this guy eventually. Two, back in 1960, the cars had those nice bench seats. The sailor sits way too close to her in the car. And then after she goes to swerve to hit the guy, he's kind of like helping her steer. But there is a very long stretch of time where her eyes are nowhere near the road. And I know he's holding the wheel as well, and he seems to be looking, but she's still controlling the gas and the brake. And I felt like she should have at least glanced up at it reminds me of that Louis C.K. joke. I know. But when he's like, he talks about getting high, and he's like, at some point I realized that I hadn't looked through the windshield for like 5 minutes, and it reminded me of that joke, and it was a little bit, it took me out of it a little bit.
Yeah, and I thought in general they did a pretty good job with. There's so much driving in this episode, and finding ways to do that where it looks like she is really driving and paying attention to the road and stuff. Mostly I thought they pulled it off okay. I agreed on that part. Yeah, the bench seat was funny because the shot was wide enough. He actually could have sat over a little more to his side, because they have her on like the right side of the frame, and instead of him on the left, he's kind of like in the center of the frame, and there's like empty space, like visually showing you that he's like scooted over way too close. Which again made me think there was going to be something creepy with the sailor,
right?
But there kind of isn't. I like the moment, so she's trying to convince him to stay after she realizes, or he realizes, that she is like behaving like a psycho, and she's trying to convince him to stay and offering like all these things. And then she's like, "I really thought we could be friends. Why don't you take me out on a date and stuff?" And I like the sort of like she gets how to manipulate a man, and to his credit, he like thinks for a second. He's like, you don't need a boyfriend, just a good night's sleep, and like gets out of the car. Like, yes, she's hot and coming on to me, even maybe because she, just wants me to stay in the car, but it's not worth me getting killed in a car wreck for it.
That's funny you say that, because I kind of looked at that part as a little bit like, because, we've been kind of wondering if we were going to see some strong female protagonists in this too. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, she's a pretty one-dimensional damsel in distress. And so I was like, oh, she's going to use her sexuality to try and get this guy to stay. It didn't sit that. I now that you're saying it that way, I think maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on it, but I thought it wasn't a great look for her when she was like.
I think it wasn't. I would agree with you on that. What I liked though was it wasn't like she just went immediately to that. She tried several other strategies, and she's kind of going through everything in her arsenal. Like that was like her last bullet. Like it is kind of beneath her. She is a lady to do that, but like she's so desperate to not be back alone on the road that I like that she was willing to throw that out there, and that you saw in him. That was like the one argument she made that kind of gave a moment's hesitation. To like, no, I'm gonna get killed in a car wreck with this lady.
She could have tried cash.
Well, why doesn't she like? I didn't get why she never stops. Like at a motel or something. Like she's driving all the way cross country. They've established. And she's like, yeah, it's been like 3 or 4 nights without sleep. I'm like, then stop and sleep.
Yeah, she
like
just kept
nobody
stopping
plans
for
to
food.
drive cross country without stopping.
Yeah, true. So this ended up kind of being like a reverse that traditional Hitchhiker, because there's that other Hitchhiker story where you're driving, pick up the girl, and she just disappears because she was dead the whole time. So this was the reverse. The driver was dead the whole time. I guess the Hitchhiker was also dead, or the devil, or God, or
Death,
whatever he
maybe.
was.
I believe you are going
Mr. Death.
My way.
Right, yeah, that's kind of one of his 2 lines that were creepy.
The question this kind of left me with in terms of if this was really happening, which I know, some of these aren't meant to be thought about in that way, but for people like the sailor, the gas station attendant, the mechanic, did they actually encounter her like as a ghost, or was this like all this sort of fantasy space and none of these things really happen?
I'm glad you asked that. So I think that it really, because she does call home at a certain point, and she does have a conversation with, and I thought this was was what makes me think that people were encountering her, because she talks to a woman that she doesn't know who she is, and because her mom has had a nervous breakdown because she died 6 days ago is kind of how we start to see the beginning of the end of the episode.
Right, which as soon as she's calling home, you're like, all right, this is where she's going to find out she died.
Right, and so that made me think that, it probably is not, probably she is still interacting with people as sort of a ghost, because, she does talk to someone she's never heard of before. Obviously, that could all be in her head too, but it made me think that this was probably... everyone else was experiencing their experiences with her too.
But then how do they know she died? Because the mechanic's like the one who would have like found her was at the accident site and like takes her car. Like,
well,
I don't know.
Think
or
about
maybe
this,
maybe that's something different. Yeah.
So think about this. So if it really would have been a fatal accident, that mechanic wouldn't have been called in until everything was all cleaned up and all that stuff. So, I guess there could be either 2 realities or whatever, or maybe her body or whatever had been cleaned off, whatever. Her ghost, because remember, she had probably, that's a good question now that I'm thinking of it. I don't know. But
I mean, maybe you're right. Like they wouldn't call the mechanic if it was just like totaled and she was dead. So maybe they dealt with all that stuff, and then like her ghost awakens or whatever and calls the mechanic, and then I don't know.
And she's
probably giving this more thought than it deserves.
Right, and she certainly wouldn't have had just a flat tire, which is what her ghost version had.
No, that's a good point. Did you notice? So I mentioned I generally like the shooting on the road and how that was all done. There were 2 moments that really stuck out to me as kind of badly done, and I think they both reflected just kind of not having what they needed or being ready to kind of shoot at night. So one is when she runs out of gas and like her car stops on this curve of this dirt road, and there's like clearly a giant light just off screen to the right, like shining on the car that does not look like moonlight or anything else. It's clearly a giant film light.
Can I guess the second one?
On that.
Before you give the second one, can I guess
the second one?
But go. Or you're done with that one?
That was the first one, and I just found it to the level of being distracting. And when they cut around to the other angle on the other side of the car, where that light was more of a backlight, it worked better. It wasn't distracting. It looked more like sort of your typical black and white nighttime shooting. So, other one, you want to guess it?
Is the second one, it's either when he's in her car or like comes up and leans against her car, the hitchhiker, and there's like a light that's shining up in his face that's wavering over his face. Is that the other one you're thinking of?
That wasn't the one I was thinking of, although
okay.
that was also distracting. The other one was the first time she sees the hitchhiker while the sailor's in the car and she swerves over to try to hit him, as we've already discussed. There's a bizarre cut-in of the car swerving where it's like broad daylight, like middle of the day. And even though it's supposed to be the middle of the night, and it's nighttime in the shot immediately before and nighttime in the shot immediately after, and just like that was the only footage of the car swerving that they had, and so they just cut it in there. And it like really, I'm like, did I just imagine that it was just daytime a minute ago? And I like rewound, like, no, that was weird.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Maybe you're dead.
Maybe I am. Let me call my mom and see if they have.
That's
any
the only
news
way to
on me.
find out.
Also, I do keep seeing this hitchhiker.
I don't have a ton of thoughts left, Mark, but I do have. I really liked. We've talked a ton about mortality and Serling's interpretation of mortality on this and death on this series. Mm-hmm. I really liked the fact that she even in a narration, right when she finds out she's dead, she completely goes calm, and it seemed like another that reminds me of One for the Angels when he accepts his death and just kind of walks calmly with Mr. Death. This seemed like another like just acceptance of it. She let the hitchhiker she knew that the hitchhiker was going to be in her car, and she just kind of accepted it. And I feel like Serling has had a lot of introspective moments about mortality.
Yeah, and I think that's a good connection to make to One for the Angels, because it's not that being I don't think he views, or at least based on what we see in the Twilight Zone, he does not view death itself as scary, but it's like the idea of dying is scary, and like once you accept that, then it's okay.
Right,
and
exactly.
Yeah, and she goes calm, and the voiceover there is like, suddenly I'm not afraid anymore.
Exactly. It was kind of neat.
Yeah.
And one other thing, and now I should have pointed this out with shots that reminded me. We did get, which we saw in Perchance to Dream, that shot of the eyes in the back car mirror, the rear view mirror. That was just, she pulls down the mirror or like the visor, and that's where her mirror is, and we see the hitchhiker in the back. Another thing that I thought that they used a shot like that.
We get him in mirrors twice, because we get that one at the very end when he says his final line, and then at the beginning when she's at the mechanic, she's like looking in her makeup compact or something and sees him in the mirror, and then like turns around and he's not there anymore.
And turns around and he's running toward the mirror to try and smash into it.
Well, you were mentioning Serling's view on mortality, and I have, I guess, my last comment here, thinking of Serling's view of humanity, and I might be projecting here because I think we did in a previous episode when we were talking about the four of us are dying, and you asked the question like, why doesn't he ever turn into somebody who's not a complete asshole? And I was like, well, most people are, so if you're just gonna randomly and I did find it striking that like the few other people she encountered, the mechanics seemed very nice. The sailor turned out to be less creepy than we thought he was going to be. But then the two other people, like the restaurant guy who has his weird like vendetta against hitchhikers, and the gas station attendant who you often
totally
use the phrase of
unhelpful.
like the 1960s is like a simpler, kinder time or something like that.
Just come in
and I was like,
stay over.
Yeah. It's like it's like some woman in the middle of the night is like stranded, her car ran out of gas, and there's like no compassion or anything.
And she thinks she's being stalked by a strange man. I'd be like, come on in, like, you can crash here or whatever.
Yeah,
or here's
like,
some gas.
let me call the, I'm not sure about
Police.
you, but let me call the police from my phone and they'll come to, like, is like, you just hang out there till the morning. I'm going back to bed.
Right.
And I'm like, this guy is like an escape clause level jerk.
Yeah. And considering
it just struck me as like, is that, it's curious to me how many people we see who just are jerks.
True.
In Twilight Zone.
Very good. Should we
That's what I got.
closing narration it?
Yeah.
So this is, I think, the shortest closing narration we've ever had. It's simply
The Twilight Zone.
the end. Nan Adams, age 27. She was driving to California to Los Angeles. She didn't make it. There was a detour through the Twilight Zone. That's it.
That's a very polite way of saying she got killed.
Yeah.
Did you think, sorry, at the beginning it talked about her occupation was a buyer at a New York department store. I was thinking if you made this episode today, that would somehow come back into play. Like
Yeah.
there'd be some element where that part of, that issue of her occupation, since it was mentioned in the beginning, does come back in later. So, and it was just interesting that it didn't. There's kind of like, here's some things about this person, so you kind of know who they are, and some of it won't be relevant.
Yeah. So should we rank the sweat on this one?
Yes, this is on a scale of 10. I'm going to say like a 2. Like I don't
had a
remember anyone
1.
really being
I had
sweaty.
yeah.
I could go with a 1.
Okay. Well, let's go with 1 because I don't remember anyone either. I only got a chance to watch this one twice, but I don't really remember. So anyone.
I wasn't
standing
looking
out.
for the sweat, but I don't remember anyone being sweaty. So let's say 1.
Okay. And then let's rank this episode or rate this episode out of 5.
I'm not really sure. I'm going to pass and let you start, and then I
Okay.
can bounce off of your comments.
So, first of all, I'm going to say the IMDb rankings of this is a very highly rated episode, and I was kind of surprised by that. There wasn't a whole lot. Like, it was like I mentioned before, this seemed more like a horror, like a short story horror thing than it was. And, obviously it was a radio play that probably, I think, would have played better on the radio than it did as a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, because the voiceovers and stuff are well written and interesting. It's just there's like not much to see.
Yeah, I really liked the performance. I feel like this is somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3, but I could probably be talked down if you're thinking lower than that.
That's our
maybe I'm
ongoing
too
thing.
generous.
You rate it, I'll talk you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was not a bad episode.
No.
It's an interesting idea. Her lead performance was good. But yeah, this is not one I have any inclination to watch again. I would maybe say like a 2.5 because I feel like some of the things that we've rated 3, I feel like were better episodes.
So yeah, just to give you an idea, I shot an arrow in the air from last week was a 3. Perchance to Dream was a 3. Mr. Denton on Doomsday, which I did like better than this, was well, I don't know. This is about
I think retroactively, some of those first couple episodes we might have bumped up like a half star or something.
yeah, because where is everybody?
Still trying to
we gave a
calibrate.
3. Yeah. So yeah, I think a 2.5 is fair.
Yeah, it's definitely not one of the episodes that we really just loathed.
No. It was an okay episode. It wasn't. I agree with you that I wasn't super looking forward to watching it a couple times though.
Yeah,
there was some interesting stuff.
Okay, 2.5 then.
2.5. It's in the books. We have to mark it, double stamp it, and move on to the next one. Speaking of the next one, Mark, do you want to guess what our next episode is going to be about?
Are you going to tell me the title, or do I just have to guess?
I'm going to tell you the title.
I think
I
I've
just
used that
wanted.
joke
I would need a
before.
verbal confirmation that you want to guess.
Do I need to have it notarized?
Yes.
Or,
The next episode is titled "The Fever."
Okay, well, since I have nothing else to go on, but I know this episode exists where the Earth is supposed to be crashing into the sun and it turns out somebody has a fever, I'm going to guess it's that one.
Okay. We are going to find out because we will be back next week. Thank you all for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. Next week's episode, as we just said, is episode 17 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled The Fever. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us, or you can go to our website. Find us at dejareviewed.com, where you can find all of our social media, and you can leave us a voicemail or a text message. And we'd love to actually have you guys expressing your opinions on these episodes and reminding us of the things that we can't think of, like what the heck that SpongeBob SquarePants context was. We'd love to hear that, and we hope you tune in next week.
Deja Reviewed.
Java.